The morning they fired me. They spelled my name wrong on the paperwork. Gregory J. Munro. 21 years. 4,700 work orders. Every pipe I crawled through. Every server I kept from frying. Every midnight emergency I handled alone while the executive floor slept. And they still could not spell the name of the man holding the whole place together. I sat in that conference room and stared at the extra letter in my last name. And something inside me went completely still. Not angry. Not devastated. Just still. Because right then, something shifted into focus that had been blurry for years. I finally understood exactly what I was to them. And more importantly, I finally understood exactly what they had forgotten they were to me. They thought they were letting me go. They had no idea they had just walked into the most expensive mistake in company history. Let me take you back to where this started. Because you need to understand what kind of loyalty I gave them before you understand what kind of justice came back. I started there in 2002. Back then, the company was not a company. It was a survival project run by 5 exhausted people above a Thai restaurant on a block that smelled like sesame oil and bus exhaust. The elevator broke twice a week. The wiring was a fire hazard. The fax machine worked only if you held the paper feed down with your thumb and said a small prayer. Nobody had titles back then. Nobody had a branded coffee mug or a strategic vision deck. We just worked. We did whatever needed doing. And we did it without asking who was supposed to do it. I fixed the locks before sunrise. I patched wires after midnight. I crawled through a ceiling once to stop a leak from dripping into a floor switch that would have shut down the whole system during a product demo. Nobody saw that. Nobody knew. The demo went fine. The investors left happy. And I went home at 2 a.m. with insulation dust in my hair and did it all again the next day. That was how it went for 21 years. The company grew. The office expanded. The Thai restaurant below us became a memory. Then the scrappy little startup became a polished downtown headquarters with glass walls and imported furniture and executives who talked about infrastructure in meetings without knowing where the main water shutoff was located. They all got new titles. New offices. Milestone parties. I got more tickets. But I kept showing up. Quiet. Reliable. Invisible. My father had handed me a 1952 Craftsman toolbox when I was 19 years old. Heavy metal. Worn handles. Every socket organized the way he taught me. He told me to do the work right or not at all. I carried that with me every day of my working life. Not because anyone noticed, but because that was who I was. Over time, I handled more than maintenance. Leases. Service contracts. Vendor negotiations. Building documentation that dated back to the founding. Systems that had no manual. Because I was the manual. I held institutional knowledge in my head that no spreadsheet could capture. And I kept all of it running because that was the job. Not because anyone would thank me. Because it had to be done. They called me maintenance. They did not know my name. And that was fine. For a long time, that was fine. Then Tyler Brooks arrived. He came in on a Wednesday with a fresh haircut. A graduate degree framed on his wall by Thursday. And a brand new title, Director of Human Resources. He was young, not hungry young. The kind of young where you have worked hard and you are trying to prove yourself. More like confident young. The kind where you have read enough management theory to believe that people are problems that can be solved by optimizing them out of the budget. He wore Patagonia vests. He said phrases like culture, alignment, and future-ready teams. He smiled at you in the way people smile when they are already categorizing you. The first time he came down to my maintenance office, he stood in the doorway like he was afraid to get whatever I had on his shoes. He looked at the breaker maps on the wall, the stacked manuals, the labeled parts, shelves, the years of organized knowledge hanging right in front of him, and asked me where the Ethernet cables went. I looked at him for a second. Then I told him they went to the same place his quarterly review was headed if he did not learn how the building actually worked. He did not laugh. After that, I noticed the way he looked at me in meetings. Never directly. Just quick side glances when someone said the word modernization. A slight pause before my name. A polite smile that had a very specific shape to it. Outdated. Expensive. Replaceable. I had seen that shape before. I had watched people with 20 years of loyalty get escorted to the elevator with a handshake and a week of pay and forgotten before their desk was cleared. I knew what that smile meant. And when Tyler started asking for vendor lists, access logs, service contracts, building documentation, and maintenance histories, I knew it was not curiosity. It was preparation. I gave him everything that belonged to the company. Clean, organized, complete. I just did not give him what belonged to me. He never thought to ask about the lease. Never looked at whose name was on the utilities. Never questioned who had been personally keeping half the building's invisible infrastructure alive since 2002. That was Tyler's mistake. He thought my value was in the keys on my belt. He never understood that the keys were just metal. The real foundation was paper, and my name was on it. Here is what nobody in that building remembered. Or maybe nobody had ever bothered to know. In 2002, when the company was nothing but 5 people and a broken elevator and a prayer, nobody would rent to us. No credit history, no track record, no reason for any landlord to believe we would survive the next 6 months. Randy Foster, the founder, was running out of options. I met him at a diner 2 blocks from the original office. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like hot disappointment and the booth cushions have a memory of every bad conversation ever held in them. He slid a lease across the table toward me. He needed a name on it. A real name with real credit. Not a co-signer. Just one name. One person the landlord could hold responsible. He promised it was temporary. He promised we would transfer it once the company built enough credit to stand on its own. He looked like a man who meant every word of it. Back then, I believed him. So I signed. Gregory Monroe. My credit, my risk, my name. The years passed. The company grew. The promise quietly expired without anyone noticing or caring. Every lease renewal came through me. Every amendment. Every conversation with the property manager. Every building modification tied to the occupancy. Nobody thought about it because I handled it before anyone had to. That was what I did. I absorbed complexity before it became a problem. That was my whole value. And they had never once paused to examine what it meant. Then they decided I was no longer part of the future. The email arrived on a Monday at 3:12 in the afternoon. I was on a ladder in conference room B, replacing a burned-out ballast in a ceiling fixture above a table where executives like to hold meetings about strategic direction. My phone started buzzing. Then buzzing again. Too many. Too fast. I climbed down and opened the message. Subject: strategic realignment opportunities. I read the first paragraph once. Then I laughed to myself. Very quietly. The way you laugh when something is not funny but you recognize it immediately. Strategic realignment meant layoffs. Role alignment meant they had already picked the names. Future-ready teams meant somebody wanted the numbers to look cleaner before the board walked through. I stood there, under that flickering light, holding the dead ballast in one hand, and thought about 21 years. About the times I had fixed badge readers after security disabled someone's access too early. About the evenings I had spent removing nameplates from doors because the manager who had ordered the cut did not want to do it themselves. About every midnight I had given them. Every silent fix. Every invisible save. Then I looked at the key ring on my belt. 14 keys. Every one labeled in my own handwriting. For the first time in a long time, I did not think about what I owed them. I thought about what they had forgotten they owed me. The meeting invite came at 4:58 that same afternoon. Subject: quick sync with HR. No agenda. Tyler's name. A lawyer I had never met. That combination told me everything. Nobody invites a lawyer to a quick sync unless someone is leaving and the company wants a signature before they do. The next morning, I wore my old denim work shirt with the company logo stitched over the chest pocket. The same shirt I had worn through ice storms, pipe failures, and server room emergencies that would have cost the company millions if I had not been there. I polished my boots before I left the house. Not for Tyler. For myself. Conference room B was cold. Tyler sat with his hands folded and his smile already assembled. The lawyer had a folder in front of him the size of a confession. Tyler started with the words, restructuring, evolving operational needs, role redundancy. I watched his mouth move and thought about the wall screen behind him. The one his approved vendor had mounted 3 inches off center because he had ignored my note about the stud placement. The lawyer slid the folder across. 3-month severance. Health coverage through the quarter. A non-disclosure agreement. And at the top of the letter, in clean official print, Gregory J. Monroe. The extra letter. 21 years. And they could not spell the name of the man who had unlocked their doors every morning since 2002. The lawyer said, "We'll need your badge and your keys." I looked at Tyler. I reached into my bag and placed the badge on the table. Then I set down the key ring. 14 keys. "You sure you want these?" I asked. Tyler said, "It's not personal. Greg." I smiled. Probably the most genuine smile I had given in that building in years. "Good luck finding the main water shutoff," I said. Then I stood up and walked out. The hallway felt longer than usual. I passed the break room where I had once rerouted a pipe to save the coffee station. Past the server closet I had kept alive through an ice storm by MacGyvering, a space heater, and a borrowed industrial fan. Past the lobby doors I had opened every morning before anyone else was even awake. Nobody looked up. I sat in my truck in the parking structure for a while, not crying, not raging, just sitting, reading my name wrong one more time, thinking about the extra letter that said everything about how little they had ever actually seen me. Then I called Leo Bishop. Leo had mowed my lawn as a teenager. $20 and a cold lemonade. Now he was a real estate attorney with a sharp mind and a very good understanding of how lease structures worked in this city. "Leo," I said, "you remember that lease I told you about once?" Pause. "The one from 2002. He said slowly. "The one still in your name." "That one," I said. Another pause. Then a low whistle. "Greg," he said. "Do they know?" "Not yet," I said. I drove home, went to my garage, and opened the bottom drawer of my father's toolbox. Under the socket wrenches, I pulled out a worn manila folder. Inside the original lease, every amendment, every renewal, a water-stained receipt from the first property manager, and a child's crayon drawing from Randy Foster's daughter from 2003 that somehow ended up in there and never left. I spread it across the workbench like a blueprint. Section 9. Subsection B. Renewal of lease term requires written notice no fewer than 30 days prior to expiration. The lease had expired on August 1st. Today was August 3rd. I searched my emails. I checked my physical mail. I called Thomas Weber, the property manager. No renewal notice had been filed. No certified letter. No email to the tenant of record. Nothing. They had been so busy restructuring the future that they had forgotten to maintain the present. The lease had defaulted to month. The tenant of record was still Gregory Monroe. And the tenant of record had just been fired with a misspelled severance letter and told to hand over his keys. I sat back in my garage chair and opened a beer. I did not feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt something quieter than that. Something closer to recognition. The building I had carried for 21 years was still, technically and legally, mine to walk away from whenever I chose. And the moment I walked away, every corporate dream they had, stacked on top of my invisible labor, would have no ground left to stand on. I gave it 2 more days. Then Leo drafted the notice. It was formal, precise, and completely airtight. Official letterhead. County filing. Certified delivery. Email confirmation. Termination of tenancy effective in 30 days. Per the terms of the original lease agreement. Everything done correctly. Everything done exactly right. Because I had learned from my father, do the work right. Or do not do it at all. I also filed the formal eviction notice through the county system, paid for expedited delivery, and uploaded the confirmation receipts with the methodical satisfaction of a man who has been organized his entire adult life and finally has an audience for it. While the filing went through, the company was somewhere upstairs preparing slide decks about scalable growth. They had no idea. The notice arrived at reception on a Tuesday morning at 9:15. Certified mail. Official county stamp. Heavy envelope. The kind of thing any reasonable person would walk immediately to the legal team. The receptionist that day was a temp named Amber. She signed for it, glanced at the return address, and dropped it on a stack of mail next to a pile of expired vendor invoices and a broken laminator that no one had fixed since I left. By noon, the PDF copy had also arrived in the general inbox. No one opened it. The executive team was too busy preparing a presentation for investors about operational excellence. Tyler was in a workshop about values integration. Phil Ashford, the CEO, was rehearsing a speech about the company's next era of strategic vision. That phrase would age poorly. For almost 2 weeks, the notice sat in the stack, ignored, waiting, patient as a load-bearing wall that has decided it is done holding the ceiling up. Then Monday happened. Tyler walked in at 8:03 with an oat milk latte and his laptop bag. By 8:10, he was standing outside Phil's office, completely frozen. Zip-tied to the door handle was a bright orange notice. Notice to vacate property. 72 hours. Tyler pulled at it. The zip tie held. People gathered. Someone from marketing leaned over a cubicle wall. Someone from accounting asked, barely above a whisper, whether they were actually being evicted. Phil arrived at 8:30. He read the notice once, then a second time, then a third. The way people read things, they desperately want to mean something different. At 9:02, he was on the phone with Thomas Weber. We never received anything, Phil said. Thomas, calm as a man holding all the documentation, explained that the notice had been delivered in person, signed for at reception, confirmed by email, and properly filed with the county. The lease had defaulted to month when the company failed to submit renewal notice by the required deadline. The tenant of record had now exercised their right to terminate. Formal eviction proceedings had been initiated. Then Phil asked the question he should have asked 21 years earlier. Who was the tenant of record? A pause. Gregory Monroe. The silence on that executive floor must have been extraordinary. By 10:20, the entire building knew. Not Gary from maintenance. Not the old guy with the keys. Gregory Monroe, the man who had been fired with a misspelled letter and 14 keys and a 3-month severance package, had just become the reason their headquarters was no longer legally theirs to occupy. The lawyers came quickly. Then the calls to investors. Then the emergency relocation planning from a team of people who could not find the freight elevator without asking security. And somewhere across town, I was in my garage sorting socket wrenches by size. For the first time in 21 years, the building had a crisis I did not have to solve. By Friday, the city block outside that polished downtown headquarters looked like the final act of a company that had confused confidence with competence. Herman Miller chairs rolled into moving trucks. Boxes of branded merchandise, motivational posters, and half-empty espresso pods lined the curb. Someone had taped hand-lettered paper to the side of a rented truck that read, "Strategic Relocation." I almost admired the wordsmithing. Tyler stood near the entrance in sunglasses that were too large for his face, talking into his phone with the energy of a man negotiating with a situation that had already stopped listening to him. Phil Ashford showed up in a damp tan suit and, at some point during the afternoon, picked up a folding chair and threw it against the side of the moving truck. Someone caught it on video. The clip made its way through employee groups, then industry blogs, then local tech forums. The same company that had spent years presenting itself as an example of operational excellence was now the story about how a 200-person firm forgot to renew the lease on its own building and got evicted by the maintenance man they fired 2 weeks Earlier, I drove past at 3:47 that afternoon. The last truck was pulling away. One broken taillight. The lobby stood empty for the first time since 2002. Through the glass doors, I could see the Bloomhaven crew already inside, taking measurements, nodding at the high ceilings and the well-maintained infrastructure. Morgan Callahan, the founder, saw my truck and walked to the window. I rolled it down. "You built something solid here, Greg," she said. I nodded. I did not need anyone to tell me that. I had known it for 21 years. But it was good to hear out loud. 2 days later, Walt from facilities called me. He said he had put in his notice. Could not stay after watching them do that to you. He said. I did not know what to say for a moment. Then he asked what I was planning to do next. I looked around my garage, at the toolbox, at the lease folder, at the phone that had been ringing all week from building managers and property owners who had heard what happened and wanted someone who actually understood how buildings worked. Someone who showed up before sunrise. Someone who knew where everything was and why. Someone who did the work right. 3 months later, I was consulting for 4 downtown properties, making more than double my previous salary, setting my own schedule, and every contract I signed, I double-checked the spelling of my name before I put pen to paper. That evening, I drove a small brass hook into the garage wall beside my father's photograph. Then I took the original key from the 2002 office, the first one cut for the first lock in that building, and I hung it there, not as a monument to what they took, as proof of what I took back. They forgot that when you fire the invisible man, sometimes the invisibility was the only thing holding the ceiling up. They called it strategic realignment. The building called it something else. So did I? If this story stayed with you, leave me a comment. Would you have warned them? Or would you have stayed quiet and let the paperwork speak for itself? And if you believe that loyalty without respect always finds a way to correct the balance. Subscribe to Alex's Revenge. A new story lands every week. And some of them are even harder to believe than this one.